Hello, everyone, and thank you to NewMR for inviting me again for my my talk on more devices, more content, more apps, more business models, more cool stuff, and of course, more predictions. I'm focusing again on where the mobile devices will go in 2016, and specifically where they'll take us in the research industry. Each year, I commit to a few predictions, and this year's no different. And I'm hoping to focus on a couple of predictions that aren't necessarily top predictions. You might not have heard them or be thinking about them, but they still impact us as an industry. So I think it's always interesting to start with some facts, which I pulled from a variety of online sources. First is that we'll cross the threshold of 2 billion smartphone users worldwide next year. And at the end of 2015, there were approximately 7 billion mobile phone users globally. There were 180 billion app downloads in 2015, and more than 1/3 of all companies developed their own apps in 2015. So the smartphone is everywhere now. Bhutan, which is one of the most isolated countries in the world, has 85% mobile phone penetration. I'm wondering if that can even be possible. I'm hiking the Himalayas later this year, and for much of the trip, I hope to be able to remain connected and send pictures. But what does this mean for us as an industry? I want to give you an example. Last year, I thought one of the most interesting sessions that I sat in at SMR Congress was called You Do Research Where? Researchers reported on what it was like to conduct research in remote regions, jails, war zones, and places like that. And Maria Schimpel with Myanmar Survey Research reported on what it's like to do research in Myanmar, where the concept of a brand and all the underlying research that entails is just now emerging. So she's there working to train a new market research industry to support what the mobile device is bringing to Myanmar, which is the opening up of markets to provide a choice of products and services to consumers. The mobile phone is literally introducing the concept of a brand and the ability to conduct research around it to a first generation of researchers in a region where brands and choices are just emerging, and that's what I'm hoping to find in Bhutan as well. So moving on to apps, according to Flurry Analytics, the average U.S. consumer is now spending more time inside apps than watching TV. 198 minutes a day compared to 168 minutes a day for TV. So since the first smartphone was introduced in 2007, it's really taken only a little less than 8 years to overtake TV in terms of viewing time, and I think more appropriately redefine what TV and viewing time is. That TV is something that's independent of device. That inside mobile web browsers, you could technically consider an app too. So if you take a look at the discrepancies there, it becomes even larger. So we are truly an app economy now. And while this isn't really a prediction, it's clear to see that mobile devices will profoundly impact our industry's use of video as well. So consider just a few small ways that video impacts us. Storytelling videos are more likely to be viewed by our clients on mobile devices. Video engagement mechanisms for panel and communities are increasingly very important. More of our industry's marketing itself is video-based. Of course, there's the whole video ad testing, which has been a growing segment for a while now. Video capture of open ends is a big force and topic of communication right now. And of course, there's virtual reality, which is on the horizon and may realistically hit our mobile devices first in terms of widespread usage, because virtual reality through Google Cardboard is all app-based. We love our apps so much. So to be clear, we're using our apps longer and we're using more apps. So the underlying growth in the number of apps is actually starting to decline, and if you've read that, it's not something you should be put off by, because maturity eventually comes to every market. The growth rates have been maybe unsustainable when you look at the underlying market base of mobile phone users, and that app maturity actually isn't here yet. So during 2015, the number of mobile apps in use grew 58%. And the impressive thing about that is that 40 points of that came from existing users, which is double the 2014 and 4 times the 2013 totals. So in other words, what the figures are saying is that once consumers start using apps, we're just looking for more and more and more apps, which is contrary actually to what I thought, which was I'd want a dozen or so, maybe no more than that, apps, and then and I was just searching for apps that I wanted to use a lot of, but that's really not the way it's going for most of us. So time to get into our predictions, and I thought I would start with one that's fairly mundane and that most of us would prefer not to spend our time on, but the truth is more devices invites new privacy and security risks, and as we've been discussing, most of the mobile experience is about apps. About half the apps out there are based on HTML5, and a key reason for using HTML5 is it reduces the development time because it crosses platforms, and in addition to mobile platforms also supports web applications. But HTML5 has its share of security risks, and the mobile channels in themselves introduce new security risks. For instance, the possibility that malicious code can be executed through channels like Bluetooth or text messages. They can be injected into an app through images and music files, like as metadata, QR codes, which I think are going obsolete anyway, and even the SSID fields transmitted through Wi-Fi. So this will come into play a bit when I talk about beacons, but unfortunately, and getting bad news out of the way first, we need to watch for even more security concerns than we've seen in the past. Prediction number 2 is that we're all UI experts these days. There's continued emphasis on improving the user interface across every app and website out there, because the user experience is the brand and it says everything about the brand. And this isn't just a trend for mobile market research, it's a trend across the full research and broader technology landscape, and I think probably brought to us originally by the late great Steve Jobs, who showed us just how important it is. The importance of the UI experience isn't just about the display. In mobile marketing, for instance, it's about creating more long-term engagement options through social media, for instance, payment options, and overall convenience. In market research, it's not so different. It's also about invitation options, reward options, communications, and the full user experience. So when you think about this for basically any research exercise that you're designing, it becomes paramount for us to focus on it as well. The market research increasingly embraces and crosses bounds with design and engineering. So we've gone beyond merely supporting mobile devices to building reputations that depend upon the mobile experience along with the web experience. When your brand is the user experience, the challenge is one that marketing and marketing research increasingly involve themselves with. So this is a more subtle trend for our industry in the design and measurement of response to the user experience design. We see a lot more research firms specializing in this field than in the past, And it's not just about the website design or the app design, it's about how we interact with our devices. It's much more human factors engineering across both devices and content layout. And UI designers are now considered one of the most up-and-coming career options, and the research around UIs is one of the most up-and-coming and promising career options within our industry. For a moment, I'm going to repeat myself from last year, but location tracking and invitation targeting based upon location are more about understanding the in-store experience than within a broader geographical context. So my prediction number 3 is a beaconing, which is the in-store targeting, is a basic block of location services. We're looking to understand what's happening during the shopping experience. Beacons provide businesses with endless opportunities to collect massive amounts of untapped data, such as the number of beacon hits and the customer dwell time at a particular location within a specific time and day, what you've walked away from, what you've picked up and looked at, and those sorts of things. Retailers can then make important decisions around everything from product display to staff allocation and those sorts of things. And the reason I focus on this prediction is that it's always wise for market research to track what's going on within the advertising industry. And in advertising, beacons are a very big thing. So for those of you who are not familiar with the concept of a beacon, let me provide an analogy. The in-store beacon is to the physical world what the cookie is for online content and commerce. Basically, it's a means of capturing location in a different and much more localized way than what we think of as geolocation services, geofencing, and geo-tracking, and within the retail and physical environment. So beacons will connect online, in-app, and in-store experiences to become a new way of engaging with the customer, just for that brief moment in time that the customer is doing something. And as we've already discussed, it's all about new forms of engagement. So basically, small Bluetooth-enabled devices are installed in the retail environment, and any app that interacts with the beacon from that Bluetooth device can communicate and track the shopper as they move through a store. So this could be for things like promotions, rewards, even some gamification, obtaining information about the product. And of course, from our industry standpoint, we always want to capture customer feedback, which in this context I would rename as experience feedback or experience measurement. So I see beaconing as a tremendous augment for the CSAT industry, but in a single touch point, a single question, and of course the balance is going to be a test of how intrusive we're willing to let all of this become in our lives. But I think we need to look at beaconing in the context of what might be going on with wearables. Wearables tie in because you surely are not going to want to pull out your phone in order to receive casual information when you're trying to shop or do something of that nature. And the wearable potentially makes this a less intrusive experience. And it's where the watch comes or the jewelry comes in. But not too much outside of experimentation with beacons actually happened to our industry in 2015, and I think that could be the case in 2016 as well. It's not too far past the Consumer Electronics Show, and so there's been a lot of buzz early in the year about all the new interesting wearable devices, but many people are saying that wearables need a killer app in order to be more broadly adopted. A lot of them are single purpose, and so right now they're mostly an experiment for those who can afford them. And I think we have something of a chicken and egg situation with beacons and wearables, where wearables have to become more widely adopted and used before they will be supported in market research. And from what I'm hearing, most of the wearables companies missed their revenue targets in 2015, yet have more competition this year. The products are getting more exciting. But beaconing solutions, are also waiting for the base of wearable users to broaden to a larger and especially a more diverse consumer base before they can become more widely implemented. So, in fact, it may even go beyond just, the adoption of wearables, because to make wearables less intrusive and a more natural extension of the body, the user interface community, if you remember a couple slides back, is working on gesture control as part of the user interface. So the flick of a wrist could indicate a response or a request of some nature. So the issue with beacons for the moment is that for 2016 and for some foreseeable future, you still mostly need to pull out your phone and respond there. And the question is, could more localized shopper information be a killer app for wearables? So that remains to be seen, but for my fourth prediction, I think 2016 remains largely a year of a lot of experimentation around beacons, although the data from the underlying apps that detect them are also, have some value in their own right. But to put wearables in perspective, and the forecasts are all over the place on these, we're looking at something along the lines of 325 million devices in the installed base in 2016, which really isn't that shabby. So everyone conducting research should know by now that millennials communicate differently than other generations. They're more mobile-centric, more engaged with social media. They require a different invitation strategy. The in-app and text messaging are very important to reach this audience, and in fact, they're causing all of us, they're probably one of the primary drivers that's requiring a rethinking of the entire survey, community, and online panel experience, all the way from invitation to rewards. And this is where many of the things we've randomly discussed in this presentation come together: the user interface, the video submissions, and in general a more experiential approach to research that's interesting and engaging. Millennials value experience above all. And unfortunately, it may not be the same experience that's meaningful to other population segments, and we're now diverging to a point where one research experience doesn't fit all, but we all need to be giving millennials more attention. So in summary, the future of market research is, as it always has been, about the vision to see how everything is evolving, human behavior as well as technological evolution, but now increasingly how that technology influences our behavior, because that's actually fundamentally changing, and we need to adapt as much as advise, so adapt as an industry. How we interact with research respondents on a more individualized basis is one way we need to adapt. The types of experiences that we offer them, the channels that we use to communicate with them, which need to vary from individual to individual within the same project, the perception that the respondent has of us and our credibility with them goes back to that user interface. The user interface is our brand and our credibility, and ultimately our ability to collect meaningful data from both qualitative and quantitative projects is hinging more and more on look and feel and experience. So the future of market research depends on our ability to design those experiences in a way that the underlying audience can relate to, so that they will respond in a way that means something to us. And where we've come since the first smartphone entered the market in 2007 is that it's now in every room of the house, unlike the telephone of the past, because we carry it with us. It can not only introduce the concept of a brand, as in NewMR, but it's actually becoming essential in even defining brands. It's become the focal point of the majority of daily communications, social interactions, entertainment options, and increasingly so for us as an industry, we must now embrace it as the first and best barometer of engagement with our respondents. Thank you. Ready for questions?